Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a concept that's as fundamental to our existence as the air we breathe. Yet it's something many of us spend a lifetime trying to ignore, resist, or escape. We're talking about impermanence, the simple, yet profoundly unsettling truth that everything changes, from the grand cosmic dance of stars being born and dying, to the subtle shift in the afternoon light, to the very cells that make up our bodies. Nothing stays the same, and let's be honest, this constant flux can be a source of immense anxiety and discomfort. We crave stability. We yearn for things to last. And when they don't, when life throws us a curveball, it can feel like the ground beneath us is crumbling. But what if I told you that this very impermanence, this relentless current of change, holds a secret? A secret that, once understood and embraced, can lead to a profound sense of peace and serenity, even amidst life's inevitable storms. Tonight, we're going on a journey to explore the wisdom of the Buddha on this very topic, to decode the nature of impermanence, and to discover how facing this truth, rather than fleeing from it, can be the key to living a more authentic, joyful, and ultimately, a more serene life. So, grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's explore the ever-shifting landscape of reality together. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? We live in a world that is, by its very definition, in a perpetual state of becoming, yet our deepest human instinct often seems to be a fight against this current. Think about it. From the moment we're born, we are initiated into a world of constant transformation. The seasons turn, each bringing its unique beauty and its eventual departure. Spring's vibrant bloom gives way to summer's lush intensity, which then mellows into autumn's golden farewell, before winter's stark embrace reminds us of rest and renewal. It's a cycle, beautiful and relentless. We see it in our own lives. In the mirror, the face that greets us today is not the same face that greeted us a decade ago, or even a year ago. Lines etch themselves around our eyes. Threads of silver appear in our hair, reminders of time's passage, of experiences lived, of changes weathered. Our relationships, too, are rivers, not static ponds. Friendships ebb and flow, some deepening with time, others fading into memory. Romantic partnerships evolve, sometimes growing stronger, sometimes diverging onto different paths. The love we feel for a child transforms as they grow from a helpless infant to an independent adult. Each stage precious, each stage fleeting. Even our careers, the structures we build to give our lives a sense of stability, are subject to the winds of change. Industries rise and fall, new technologies render old skills obsolete, and personal ambitions shift, leading us down unexpected avenues. And these are just the big, noticeable changes. What about the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts that occur moment by moment? The thought that just passed through your mind, already gone, replaced by another. The breath you just took, now a part of your past. The feeling of contentment, or perhaps anxiety, that you're experiencing right now, that too will shift. So, if change is this all-pervasive, this utterly fundamental aspect of reality, why do we often find it so unsettling? Why do we resist it, sometimes with every fiber of our being? I think a large part of it stems from a very human desire for control, for predictability. We like to know what's coming. We build routines, make plans, set goals, all in an effort to sculpt a future that feels safe and manageable. Change, by its very nature, disrupts these plans. It introduces the unknown, and the unknown can be scary. It's like navigating a familiar room in the dark. You might stumble. You might bump into things you didn't expect. There's a comfort in the known, even if the known isn't always perfect. Then there's attachment. We become attached to things as they are, or as we wish them to be. We get attached to our youth, to our health, to a particular job, to a specific relationship, to a certain way of life. We invest these things with our sense of identity, our happiness. So, when change threatens to take them away, or alter them, it feels like a personal loss, a diminishing of ourselves. It's the pain of letting go, the grief that accompanies the end of something we valued. This isn't a flaw, it's a deeply ingrained human response. We are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, to hold on to what feels good and to push away what feels threatening. And change, very often, feels like a threat to our carefully constructed comfort zones. Our minds, in their incredible capacity for creating narratives, also play a significant role in this resistance. We construct stories about how things should be, We build an idealized version of permanence, a mental fortress against the tides of reality. We tell ourselves, if only this moment could last forever. Or, I'll be happy when X, Y, or Z is stable and secure. We chase after forever in our relationships, seek lasting achievements in our careers, and even try to freeze moments in photographs, desperately trying to hold onto the ephemeral. It's as if we're trying to build a sandcastle on the edge of the ocean at high tide. Surprised and frustrated each time a wave comes and washes a part of it away. This constant effort to maintain an illusion of permanence, to resist the natural flow, is exhausting. It creates an inner tension, a friction between our desires and the way things actually are. This friction, this resistance, is a significant source of our stress, our anxiety, our frustration, and ultimately, our suffering, when our expectation of stability crashes against the reality of constant flux. The result is often disappointment, disillusionment, and a sense of being adrift. Imagine holding a handful of water. If you clench your fist tightly, trying to possess it, the water slips through your fingers, and all you're left with is an empty, aching hand. But if you cup your hands gently, allowing the water to rest there, you can experience its coolness, its presence, for a moment, before it naturally flows on. Our resistance to change is like that clenched fist. We try to grasp, to hold, to control, and in doing so, we often miss the beauty and the lessons inherent in the flow itself. We become so focused on preventing the loss that we fail to appreciate what we have in the present moment. The irony is that the more we fight against change, the more we suffer. The more we try to nail things down, the more painful it becomes when they inevitably shift. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of constantly battling the current, we could learn to swim with it, or even to surf its waves? What if this unsettling truth of change wasn't a curse, but a key? A key to unlocking a different kind of understanding, a different way of being in the world. This is precisely where the ancient wisdom of the East, particularly the teachings of the Buddha, offers a profound and liberating perspective. He saw this struggle, this human tendency to cling, and he offered a path not to stop change, for that is impossible, but to change our relationship to change. And that, my friends, is where our exploration truly begins. This deep human struggle with the shifting sands of existence wasn't lost on a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived over 2.5 millennia ago in ancient India. Born into immense privilege, sheltered within palace walls from the harsh realities of life, Siddhartha was initially cocooned in an illusion of blissful permanence. His father, King Suddhodana, understanding the prophecy that his son would either become a great king or a great spiritual leader, deliberately shielded him from any sight or experience that might cause him distress or lead him towards a contemplative path. He was surrounded by youth, health, beauty, and pleasure. Every desire was catered to, every potential discomfort meticulously removed. For many years, Siddhartha lived in this gilded cage, unaware of the fundamental truths of aging, sickness, and death that lay just beyond the palace gates. He experienced the world as a place of enduring joy and unchanging delights, a reality carefully curated to keep the specter of impermanence at bay. But no walls, however high, can hold back the truth of existence forever. The turning point came during a series of chariot rides outside the palace, excursions that his father had tried to carefully manage. Despite these precautions, Siddhartha encountered what are famously known as the four sights. First, he saw an old man, frail and bent with age, his body a testament to the relentless march of time. This was a profound shock. He, who had only known youthful vitality, was confronted with the undeniable reality that youth fades, that strength wanes, that the body itself is subject to decay. Then, on a subsequent outing, he encountered a sick person, racked with pain and disease. This sight pierced another layer of his sheltered understanding, revealing that health, too, is fragile and can be stolen away by illness, leaving behind suffering and vulnerability. The third sight was perhaps the most jarring, a corpse being carried to cremation. This was the ultimate confrontation with impermanence, the undeniable end of a life, the dissolution of a being, the finality of death, the fact that all beings, regardless of status or wealth, must eventually face this cessation, shook Siddhartha to his core. These three sights revealed the pervasive nature of suffering, dukkha, and its intrinsic link to the impermanent nature of life. The pleasures he had known, the security he had felt, all seemed to crumble in the face of these stark realities. His carefully constructed world of permanent joy was shattered. However, it was the fourth sight that offered a glimmer of a different path. He saw an ascetic, a renunciant, a wandering holy man with a serene countenance, radiating an aura of peace despite having no worldly possessions. This individual, who had voluntarily embraced a life of simplicity and renunciation, seemed to have found a way to navigate these harsh truths without despair. The ascetic's calm suggested that there might be a way beyond the suffering inherent in a life bound to constant change and inevitable loss. These encounters were not just fleeting observations for Siddhartha, they were deeply transformative experiences. The comfortable ignorance he had lived in was replaced by a profound disquiet. A burning question. If life is characterized by such inevitable change, leading to old age, sickness, and death, then what is the point of all the fleeting pleasures? Is there a way to find lasting peace? A way to transcend this cycle of suffering? This existential crisis propelled him to make a radical decision. At the age of 29, Siddhartha renounced his princely life, his wife, his newborn son, and all the comforts and privileges he had known. He left the palace in secret, trading his royal robes for the simple garments of an ascetic, and embarked on a quest for truth, for an end to suffering. For 6 long years, he subjected himself to extreme austerities, practicing severe forms of self-mortification with various teachers. He starved his body, pushed himself to the limits of physical endurance, believing, as was common among ascetics of his time, that subduing the body would lead to spiritual liberation. He mastered meditative techniques, achieved high states of concentration. But still, the ultimate answer, the true cessation of suffering, eluded him. He realized that neither the path of sensual indulgence he had known in the palace, nor the path of extreme self-denial he was currently treading, led to true liberation. Both were extremes, and the truth, he began to suspect, lay somewhere in the middle. Finally, near starvation and realizing the futility of extreme asceticism, he accepted a bowl of milk rice from a young woman named Sujata. This act of nourishment marked a shift towards what he would later call the middle way. Reinvigorated, he sat beneath a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, vowing not to rise until he had attained enlightenment. Through deep meditation, focusing his mind with unwavering resolve, he delved into the very nature of existence. And it was here, under the Bodhi tree, on a full moon night, that Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one. What was the core of this awakening? It was a profound, direct, and experiential realization of the interconnectedness of all things and, crucially for our discussion, the universal truth of impermanence, anicca. He didn't just intellectually understand that things change, he saw it deeply and pervasively, in every aspect of conditioned existence. He saw the arising and passing away of all phenomena, from the grandest cosmic events to the most fleeting thoughts and sensations. He saw that nothing possesses a fixed, independent, or permanent essence. Everything is in a state of constant flux, a ceaseless flow of becoming and unbecoming. This realization of impermanence wasn't a pessimistic or nihilistic discovery for the Buddha. It wasn't a cause for despair. Instead, it was a cornerstone of his liberation. He understood that much of human suffering arises precisely because we fail to see, or refuse to accept, this fundamental truth. We cling to things as if they were permanent. We desire stability in a world that is inherently unstable. And this clinging, this resistance to the natural flow of change, is what creates our anguish. His insight was that impermanence is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. And by understanding and accepting this, by aligning ourselves with this reality rather than fighting against it, we could find a path to release from suffering. The Buddha's profound insight, born from his own intense seeking and deep meditation, wasn't just a philosophical idea, it was a practical key. It was the understanding that if all conditioned things are impermanent, then our attachment to them is bound to lead to disappointment. But, by the same token, if the conditions that create suffering are also impermanent, then suffering itself can cease. This was the profound hope embedded within the realization of impermanence. It wasn't a grim sentence, but a pathway to freedom, a call to awaken to the true nature of reality and, in doing so, to find a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that is not dependent on things staying the same, but a peace found within the very heart of change. At the very heart of the Buddha's teaching on impermanence lies the Pali word anicca, pronounced anicca. While often simply translated as impermanence, this term encapsulates a far more nuanced and profound understanding of the nature of reality. It's not just a casual observation that things don't last, it's a fundamental characteristic. One of the three marks of existence, tilakkhana, in Buddhist philosophy. Alongside dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and anatta, non-self. To truly grasp the Buddha's secret to serene living, we need to delve deeper into what anicca signifies. It's more than just the idea that your favorite coffee mug will eventually break, or that seasons change. It's a pervasive, moment-to-moment truth that applies to all compounded, conditioned phenomena. This means everything that arises due to causes and conditions, which is, essentially, everything we experience in the physical and mental realms, is subject to anicca. There are no exceptions within this conditioned sphere. Anicca points to the inherent instability and transience of all formations. Nothing that is assembled, constructed, or brought into being can remain static. Think of it like a wave in the ocean. A wave arises due to a complex interplay of wind, water, and energy. It has a distinct form for a period. It travels, it crests, and then it inevitably breaks and dissolves back into the vastness of the ocean. At no point is the wave a fixed, independent entity. Its existence is entirely dependent on a confluence of conditions. And its nature is to change, to move, to transform, and ultimately, to cease as a distinct wave. Similarly, all things in our experience, physical objects, mental states, emotions, situations, even our own bodies and identities, are like these waves. They arise. They exist for a time in a particular form due to supporting conditions. And then, as those conditions change, they too change and eventually pass away. This isn't a flaw, it's their intrinsic nature. The Buddha didn't present anicca as a depressing reality, but rather as a liberating one. Understanding anicca helps us to see things as they truly are, without the distorting lens of our desires for permanence. When we don't see anicca clearly, we are prone to attachment, upadana. We grasp onto pleasant experiences, people, and possessions, desperately hoping they will last forever. When they inevitably change or end, we experience suffering, disappointment, grief, frustration. Conversely, we try to push away unpleasant experiences, hoping they will quickly disappear. But if we understand anicca, we realize that even unpleasant experiences are impermanent. They too will pass. This understanding can give us resilience and patience in difficult times. It's not about becoming indifferent or apathetic, but about cultivating a wise perspective that acknowledges the transient nature of all things, both pleasant and unpleasant. Anicca also highlights the process nature of reality. We tend to perceive the world in terms of discrete, solid things. We see a tree, a chair, a person, but from the perspective of anicca, these are not static entities but rather ongoing processes, dynamic systems of arising and ceasing. A tree is a continuous process of growth, decay, and transformation, interacting with sunlight, water, soil, and air. Our bodies are constantly changing, with cells dying and new cells being born. With every breath, every heartbeat, even our thoughts and emotions are not fixed states but fleeting mental events that arise, linger for a moment, and then dissolve. This moment-to-moment change is often too subtle for our ordinary perception, which tends to take snapshots and create an illusion of solidity and permanence. Meditation, particularly insight meditation, vipassana, is a key practice in Buddhism for developing the sensitivity to directly perceive anicca at this experiential level. Through careful observation of the breath, bodily sensations, and mental events, one begins to see their arising and passing, their flicker and flow. One crucial aspect of anicca is that it's not just about endings, but about constant transformation. It's not simply that things will eventually break or die, it's that they are never truly static even while they appear to exist. A river is the classic metaphor. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice. Because the water is constantly flowing, constantly changing. The river maintains its identity as the river, but its constituent parts are in perpetual motion. Similarly, the you that started reading this section is not precisely the same you that is reading this sentence. New thoughts have arisen. Old cells have died. New experiences have been registered. This continuous, subtle transformation is the essence of anicca. It's not just a future event, death or destruction, it's a present moment reality. Understanding anicca helps to dismantle the illusion of control. We invest so much energy trying to fix things in place, to maintain the status quo, to prevent loss. But if everything is inherently impermanent, then this struggle is ultimately futile and a source of immense stress. It's like trying to build a dam with sand. Instead, wisdom lies in recognizing the flow and learning to navigate it with skill and grace. This doesn't mean we become passive or fatalistic. We still make plans, build things, and strive for goals, but we do so with an underlying awareness that the outcomes are not entirely within our control and that the forms we create are, by their nature, temporary. This awareness can bring a lightness and flexibility to our endeavors, reducing the anxiety associated with success and failure. Furthermore, anicca is universal. It applies equally to the grand and the minute, the beautiful and the mundane, the pleasant and the painful. The lifespan of a star and the lifespan of a mayfly are both expressions of anicca. The joy of a new love and the sorrow of a loss are both impermanent states. This universality is important because it means there's no escape within conditioned existence. There's no special realm where things last forever. Recognizing this can help us to let go of unrealistic expectations and to find a deeper appreciation for the present moment. Precisely because it is fleeting. If this moment, this experience, this interaction is transient, then it becomes more precious, more worthy of our full attention. The teaching of anicca, therefore, isn't a call to nihilism but an invitation to engage with life more fully and authentically. Aware of its precious, passing nature, it's a fundamental shift in perspective. From clinging to a fantasized permanence to embracing the dynamic, ever-changing dance of reality. This embrace, as we will explore, is not one of resignation, but one that opens the door to a profound and unshakable peace. The principle of anicca, this relentless dance of impermanence, isn't confined to some abstract philosophical realm or solely to our personal, everyday experiences. Its signature is writ large across the entire canvas of existence. From the mind-boggling expanse of the cosmos down to the most mundane objects and fleeting moments that constitute our daily lives. When we truly begin to look, we see that flux is not an occasional interruption but the very rhythm of the universe. It's a symphony of arising and ceasing, a constant transformation that underpins everything. Contemplating impermanence on these different scales can deepen our understanding and help us internalize this fundamental truth, moving it from an intellectual concept to a lived reality. Let's start by casting our gaze outwards, towards the cosmic scale. The universe itself is a grand testament to anicca. We now understand that stars, those seemingly eternal beacons in the night sky, are not permanent fixtures. They are born from vast clouds of gas and dust. Drawn together by gravity, they shine for millions, or even billions, of years, fusing elements in their fiery cores, creating the very building blocks of planets and life. But eventually, their fuel runs out. Depending on their mass, they may swell into red giants, shed their outer layers to form beautiful planetary nebulae, or explode in spectacular supernovae, scattering their enriched contents across space to seed new generations of stars and planets. Even the galaxies, those immense islands of stars, are not static. They drift, they collide, they merge over eons, reshaping the cosmic landscape. The universe began with a Big Bang, an explosive moment of creation, and scientists debate its ultimate fate, perhaps a big freeze, a big rip, or a big crunch, all scenarios depicting profound, ultimate change. These cosmic dramas unfold over timescales that dwarf human comprehension. Yet they are all expressions of the same underlying principle. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is in a state of transformation. The mountains that seem so solid and enduring are slowly being eroded by wind and water. Uplifted by tectonic forces, their forms constantly, albeit imperceptibly to our short lifespans, being reshaped. Planets form, evolve, and will eventually be consumed by their dying stars. Now, let's bring our focus closer to home, to the world around us and the objects we interact with daily. Consider the house you live in. It may seem stable and enduring, a shelter against the elements. But it, too, is subject to anicca. Wood decays, paint peels, metal rusts, foundations settle. Without constant maintenance and repair, it will inevitably deteriorate over time. The clothes you wear, once new and vibrant, gradually fade, fray, and wear out. The car you drive, a complex assembly of metal, plastic, and rubber, accumulates wear and tear with every mile, eventually succumbing to mechanical failures and obsolescence. Even the technology that seems to advance at such a dizzying pace, promising ever newer and better gadgets, is a prime example of impermanence. The cutting-edge smartphone of today will be outdated in a few years, replaced by something faster, sleeker, with more features. This rapid cycle of innovation and obsolescence is a very visible manifestation of anicca in our modern lives. Think about the food you eat. A piece of fruit, perfectly ripe and delicious, will, if left uneaten, begin to decay, to break down, returning its elements to the earth. A carefully prepared meal, enjoyed in one moment, is gone in the next, transformed into energy and waste. The beauty of a flower, vibrant and fragrant, is inherently transient. It blooms, displays its glory for a short time, and then wilts and fades. It is precisely this fleeting nature that often makes its beauty so poignant. We know it won't last, and so we cherish it more. Even the seemingly most inert objects, like a stone, are undergoing imperceptible changes, subject to weathering, erosion, and the slow geological processes of the earth. Beyond physical objects, our experiences are profoundly marked by this daily flux. A joyful gathering with friends, filled with laughter and connection, it comes to an end. A difficult day at work, fraught with stress and frustration, it too passes. The pleasure of a good book, the excitement of a new project, the quiet contentment of a peaceful evening, all are transient states. Our emotions are perhaps the most obvious examples of this inner flux. One moment we might feel happy, the next anxious, then perhaps calm, then irritated. These emotional states arise in response to conditions, linger for a time, and then give way to new states. Trying to cling to a pleasant emotion, or forcefully suppress an unpleasant one, is often a futile exercise because their nature is to flow and change. The very rhythm of our day is a cycle of impermanence. We wake, we go through our activities, and then we sleep, a period of unconsciousness and renewal. The weather changes from moment to moment. A sunny sky can cloud over. A calm day can turn windy. Our energy levels fluctuate throughout the day. Our attention wanders. The sounds we hear, the sights we see, the smells we perceive, all are fleeting sensory inputs, constantly shifting. This moment, right now, as you read these words, is unique. It will never come again in exactly the same way. The specific configuration of your thoughts, your physical sensations, the ambient sounds, the light in the room, all of it is a unique, unrepeatable confluence of conditions. By consciously observing this cosmic and daily flux, by paying attention to the arising and passing of phenomena both large and small, we begin to desolidify our perception of reality. We start to see that the world is not a collection of fixed entities but a dynamic process. This isn't meant to induce a sense of insecurity or nihilism. Quite the opposite. Recognizing the pervasive nature of anicca can foster a deeper appreciation for the present moment. If everything is changing, then this moment is precious. It can also cultivate a sense of perspective. The problems that seem so overwhelming today will also change. The joys that feel so intense will also transform. This understanding allows us to hold our experiences a little more lightly, to be less attached to outcomes, and to find a sense of equanimity amidst the inevitable ups and downs of life. The universe doesn't offer us permanence, but it offers us an endless, fascinating, and ultimately liberating dance of change. If only we learn the steps. Having explored the vast cosmic ballet of impermanence and its presence in the everyday objects and experiences around us, we now turn our gaze inward, to perhaps the most intimate and often most challenging arena where anicca plays out, our very own selves. The concept of a fixed, enduring, me, or I, is one of the most deeply ingrained illusions we hold. We instinctively feel like a continuous, stable entity, a singular consciousness inhabiting a body that, while it changes, still feels fundamentally mine. Yet, according to the Buddha's wisdom. And indeed, as supported by modern science, this sense of a permanent, unchanging self is a misconception. Our physical bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, and our consciousness are all subject to the same relentless law of Anicca, constantly arising, changing, and passing away. Let's begin with the most tangible aspect of ourselves, our physical body. From the moment of conception, our body is a whirlwind of ceaseless activity and transformation. Cells are constantly dividing, dying, and being replaced. The baby born is not the toddler, nor the teenager, nor the adult, nor the elderly person. At every stage, the physical form is different, composed of different cells, different energies. Scientists tell us that over a period of about 7 to 10 years, almost every atom in our body is replaced. So, the physical substance of you from a decade ago is largely no longer present. You are, quite literally, not the same person. Physically speaking, we experience this overtly through growth in childhood, the changes of puberty, the gradual signs of aging, wrinkles, gray hair, a slowing metabolism, diminishing physical prowess. Illnesses come and go, injuries heal, or leave their mark. Our weight fluctuates, our strength varies. The body is not a static monument but a dynamic biological process. A flowing river of matter and energy, constantly renewing and decaying. To cling to a particular image of our body, whether it's youthful vitality or peak physical fitness, is to set ourselves up for inevitable disappointment, because the very nature of the body is to change. Then there are our thoughts. Try for a moment to observe the stream of your consciousness. Thoughts arise, seemingly from nowhere, linger for a brief period, and then dissolve, only to be replaced by new thoughts. Some are fleeting and inconsequential. Others are persistent and recurring. We have thoughts about the past, plans for the future, judgments, analyses, questions, daydreams. The content of our minds is in constant motion. The you who had a specific thought 5 minutes ago has already experienced a cascade of subsequent thoughts. To identify ourselves completely with any particular thought, or even a dominant thought pattern, is to attach ourselves to something inherently transient. While we can certainly cultivate more wholesome thought patterns, the thoughts themselves remain impermanent events in the mind. The clarity of mind you might experience after meditation, or the mental fog you feel when tired, these two are changing states. Our emotions are perhaps even more obviously fluid and impermanent. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, love, excitement, boredom, these emotional states wash over us like waves. An event occurs, an emotion arises in response. It peaks, and then it subsides, often giving way to another emotion or a more neutral state. Sometimes emotions can be intense and overwhelming, feeling as though they will last forever. In the grip of deep grief or profound anger, it can be hard to imagine ever feeling differently. Yet, even these powerful emotions eventually shift, transform, or lessen in intensity. Think back to a time you felt incredibly happy or incredibly sad. While the memory remains, the raw, immediate intensity of that emotion has likely faded or changed. To expect to feel happy all the time, or to believe that a negative emotion will define us permanently, is to misunderstand the nature of emotions as transient, conditioned responses. Recognizing their impermanence doesn't mean suppressing them or invalidating them, rather, it means we can experience them fully without being completely swept away by them. Knowing that, this too shall pass. Even our consciousness, the very awareness that experiences all of this, is not a static, monolithic entity. It fluctuates in clarity and intensity. There are moments of sharp focus and moments of dullness or distraction. We experience different states of consciousness, wakefulness, dreaming, deep sleep. Our level of awareness changes depending on our physical state, tiredness, illness, our mental state, concentration, agitation, and external stimuli, while there is a continuity of experience that gives us a sense of self. The moment-to-moment quality of that awareness is constantly shifting. The Buddha's teaching on anatta, or non-self, is intricately linked here. The idea is that there isn't a permanent, independent, controller, or owner of these experiences. No core, self, that stands apart from this ever-changing stream of physical and mental phenomena. Instead, self is more accurately seen as an ongoing process, a collection of interconnected and interdependent elements, all of which are impermanent. This understanding of our ever-changing selves can be initially disconcerting. If I am not my body, not my thoughts, not my emotions in any permanent sense, then who or what am I? This question can lead to a profound inquiry into the nature of identity. But it can also be incredibly liberating. If we are not fixed entities, then we are not permanently defined by our past mistakes, our current moods, or our physical limitations. There is always room for change, for growth, for transformation. If our anger is impermanent, we don't have to be an angry person. If our sadness is impermanent, we don't have to be defined by it. If our current understanding is limited, it too can change and expand. Embracing the impermanence of ourselves allows for a greater degree of self-compassion. We can be kinder to ourselves when we make mistakes, knowing that the self that erred is already changing. We can be more patient with our perceived flaws, understanding them as temporary states rather than fixed character traits. It also frees us from the burden of maintaining a rigid self-image. We can allow ourselves to evolve, to explore different aspects of our potential, without feeling constrained by who we thought we were supposed to be. The self is not a noun, but a verb, a continuous process of becoming. By recognizing and accepting this constant flux within our own being, we open ourselves up to a more fluid, adaptable, and ultimately more peaceful way of living, less attached to a static ideal and more in harmony with the dynamic reality of our existence. Having explored the pervasive nature of Anicca, its presence in the cosmos, in our daily lives, and within our very selves, we now arrive at a crucial juncture, understanding why this fundamental truth of impermanence is so intimately linked to our experience of suffering, or dukkha, as it's termed in Buddhist philosophy. The Buddha's first noble truth famously states that life is dukkha, often translated as life is suffering. This doesn't mean that every single moment is filled with agony, but rather that there's an underlying unsatisfactoriness, a subtle dis-ease, inherent in conditioned existence, largely stemming from our failure to truly see and accept impermanence. It is our clinging to the illusion of permanence, our desperate attempts to hold on to what is inherently fleeting, that becomes a primary engine of our discontent and pain. The mechanism is quite straightforward, yet profoundly impactful. We desire things to last. We form attachments to people, possessions, experiences, states of mind, and even to our sense of self. We crave security, stability, and predictability in a world that, as we've seen, offers none of these in any absolute, lasting sense. When we invest our happiness and our sense of identity in things that are, by their very nature, impermanent, we are setting ourselves up for an inevitable collision with reality. This collision is what manifests as dukkha. Think of it like building a house on shifting sand. No matter how beautifully constructed the house, its foundation is unstable. Sooner or later, the shifting sands will cause cracks, instability, and eventually, collapse. Our attachments are like that house. The inherent impermanence of all conditioned things is the shifting sand. Consider our attachment to pleasant experiences. When we are experiencing joy, pleasure, or success, there's a natural human tendency to want it to continue indefinitely. We try to grasp it, to hold on to it, to prolong it. We might think, this is perfect. I wish it could always be like this. But Anicca dictates that all experiences, however delightful, are transient. The wonderful vacation ends. The peak moment of achievement fades. The blissful feeling subsides. When it does, if our happiness was entirely dependent on the permanence of that experience, we feel a sense of loss, disappointment, or even sadness. It's not the ending of the pleasant experience itself that is the core problem, but our attachment to it, our resistance to its natural passing. The stronger the clinging, the more acute the suffering when change occurs. The same principle applies to our relationships. We form deep bonds with loved ones, family, friends, romantic partners. These connections bring immense joy, support, and meaning to our lives. Naturally, we want these relationships to endure forever. However, people change, circumstances change, relationships evolve, and ultimately, all lives end. The pain of separation, whether through misunderstanding, distance, breakup, or death, can be excruciating. While grief is a natural and healthy response to loss, A significant portion of the prolonged suffering often comes from our inability to reconcile with the impermanent nature of the relationship or the person. We rail against the change. We wish things were different. We cling to memories and idealized versions of what was, or what we hoped would be. This resistance to the reality of change amplifies our pain. Our attachment to possessions also fuels dukkha. We work hard to acquire material goods, a nice car, a comfortable home, beautiful objects. We derive pleasure and a sense of security from them. But these things are all subject to anicca. They can be lost, stolen, damaged, or simply wear out, if our sense of well-being is heavily invested in these material possessions. Their loss or deterioration can cause significant distress, anxiety, and frustration. The more we identify with what we own, the more vulnerable we are to suffering when those possessions are affected by change. Even our attachment to our views, opinions, and our sense of self can be a potent source of suffering. We develop strong beliefs about ourselves, about others, about how the world should work. When these beliefs are challenged, when our self-image is threatened, or when reality doesn't conform to our expectations, we can experience anger, defensiveness, confusion, or a sense of personal attack. We cling to a particular identity. I am a successful person. I am a healthy person. I am always right. And when life inevitably presents situations that contradict this fixed identity, failure, illness, being proven wrong, we suffer. Our resistance to seeing ourselves as fluid, evolving beings, subject to the same laws of impermanence as everything else, creates inner conflict and pain. The Buddha described this clinging with the Pali word tanha, which translates as thirst, craving, or desire. It's not just ordinary desire, like wanting a glass of water when you're thirsty. Tanha refers to a deeper, more problematic form of craving, the craving for things to be different from how they are. The craving for permanence in an impermanent world. The craving for a self that is solid and unchanging. This craving, born from ignorance, avijja, of anicca, is identified in the second noble truth as the root cause of dukkha. It's a relentless striving to make the impermanent permanent, to control the uncontrollable, to satisfy a thirst that can never be truly quenched as long as we are seeking satisfaction in things that are inherently fleeting. Therefore, suffering is not an arbitrary punishment inflicted upon us by an uncaring universe. It is, in large part, a self-created experience, arising from a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. It's the friction generated when our desires for permanence rub up against the undeniable truth of impermanence. When we expect the river to stop flowing, we will inevitably be disappointed and frustrated. The river will continue to flow, regardless of our wishes. The wisdom lies not in trying to stop the river, but in understanding its nature and learning to flow with it. By recognizing how our attachment to the illusion of permanence fuels our suffering, we begin to see that the path to reducing that suffering lies in loosening that grip, in cultivating non-attachment, and in aligning our understanding with the way things truly are. This doesn't mean we stop loving, stop enjoying, or stop striving. It means we do so with a profound awareness of anicca, which allows us to cherish without clinging, to experience without demanding permanence, and to navigate the inevitable changes of life with greater wisdom and peace. The pervasive nature of impermanence, anicca, leads directly to another cornerstone of Buddhist thought, a concept that can be even more challenging to our conventional understanding of ourselves, anatta, often translated as non-self, no soul, or egolessness. If everything is constantly changing, in a state of flux, with no enduring, independent substance, then this must also apply to what we call I, me, or myself. The idea that there is no fixed, permanent, independent self or soul that exists separately from the ever-changing psycho-physical processes that constitute a being is a radical and profound insight. It directly confronts our deeply ingrained intuition of a stable, continuous self that is the owner of our body, the thinker of our thoughts, and the feeler of our emotions. The teaching of anatta doesn't deny our conventional, everyday experience of being a person. We obviously exist as individuals, with unique histories, personalities, and experiences. The Buddha wasn't saying you don't exist. Rather, anatta challenges the nature of that existence. It posits that what we take to be a solid, singular, and enduring self is, upon closer examination, a composite, interdependent, and constantly changing process. There is no unchanging essence or soul, Atman, in the Hindu context which the Buddha was responding to, that resides within us, untouched by the flow of impermanence. Just as a chariot is not a separate entity apart from its wheels, axle, frame, and horses, but rather a collection of these parts, assembled and functioning together, so too is the self, a conventional designation for an aggregation of constantly changing physical and mental components. The Buddha analyzed the human being into 5 aggregates, or khandhas, skandhas in Sanskrit, which are often referred to as the 5 heaps, or 5 bundles of clinging. These are rupa, form, matter. This refers to our physical body, including our sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the physical world we perceive. As we've discussed, the body is undeniably impermanent, constantly changing from birth to death. Vedana, sensation, feeling. This includes all our sensations, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, arising from the contact of our sense organs with sense objects, or from mental activity. Feelings are fleeting. A pleasant feeling gives way to a neutral or unpleasant one, and so on. They are entirely dependent on conditions and are in constant flux. Sana, perception, recognition. This is the faculty that recognizes, identifies, and conceptualizes objects and experiences. For example, seeing a shape and color and recognizing it as a tree or a person. Perceptions are also conditioned and impermanent. Our understanding of something can change. Our recognition can be faulty. And the act of perceiving is itself a momentary event. Sankhara, mental formations, volitional activities. This is a broad category that includes all our mental habits, tendencies, dispositions, volitions, intentions, thoughts, biases, prejudices, desires, and aversions. These are the active forces in our mind that shape our character and generate karma. Like thoughts and emotions, these mental formations are constantly arising and passing away, influencing and being influenced by other factors. Vijnana, consciousness, awareness. This refers to the faculty of awareness itself. The knowing or cognizance that arises when a sense organ makes contact with a sense object, e.g. eye consciousness arises when the eye sees a form. Ear consciousness when the ear hears a sound. Mind consciousness when the mind cognizes a thought or emotion. Consciousness is not a continuous, monolithic entity but rather a series of discrete moments of awareness, arising and ceasing with each perceptual event. It is dependent on the other aggregates and is, therefore, also impermanent. The Buddha taught that what we call self is nothing more than a temporary assemblage of these 5 impermanent and interdependent aggregates. There is no I to be found outside of these aggregates. Nor is there a permanent I that owns or controls them. Because each of these aggregates is characterized by anicca, impermanence, and is ultimately unsatisfactory, dukkha. If clung to, none of them can be rightly regarded as me, mine, or myself. To identify with any of these impermanent components as a permanent self is the fundamental delusion that leads to clinging and suffering. If my body is me, then its aging and decay become my aging and decay, causing distress. If my pleasant feelings are mine, then their cessation becomes my loss. If my thoughts are me, then critical thoughts about myself become a source of deep insecurity. The teaching of anatta is deeply intertwined with anicca. It is because all these components are impermanent that they cannot constitute a permanent, unchanging self. If there were such an abiding self, it would have to be independent of these changing conditions. But no such entity can be found upon investigation. This doesn't mean there's no continuity. There is a stream of consciousness, a causal continuum where past actions and experiences shape present ones, and present actions shape future ones, karma. But this continuity is like the flame of a candle being passed from one candle to the next. The flame on the second candle is causally connected to the first, but it is not the same flame. Similarly, the you of this moment is causally connected to the you of yesterday, but it's not an identical, unchanging entity. Understanding anatta can be profoundly liberating. If there is no fixed self to defend, then much of our anxiety, insecurity, pride, and possessiveness can begin to dissolve. If there is no permanent me, that is being threatened by change or loss. Then we can meet life's vicissitudes with greater equanimity. It can free us from the burden of trying to create and maintain a perfect, unchanging self-image. It allows for genuine transformation, as we are not stuck being a particular type of person. It also fosters deep compassion and interconnectedness. If the self is not a separate, isolated entity, but rather a confluence of interdependent processes, then the boundaries between self and other become more permeable. We see that others are also composed of these same impermanent aggregates, subject to the same laws of change and suffering. This shared condition can be a powerful basis for empathy and kindness. The realization of anatta is not something to be merely intellectually understood. It is meant to be experienced directly through meditative insight. By observing the arising and passing of thoughts, feelings, and sensations without identifying with them, one begins to see that there is no central observer or controller behind these phenomena. There is just the process, the flow. This direct seeing is what chips away at the deeply ingrained habit of self-cherishing and opens the door to a profound freedom. The freedom that comes from letting go of the illusion of a fixed, separate self, and embracing the fluid, interconnected, and ever-changing nature of our being. It's the ultimate understanding that if there is no permanent self to begin with, then there is no self that can truly be lost to the tides of impermanence. Understanding the profound truths of anicca, impermanence, and anatta, non-self, is one thing. Truly integrating them into our lives and learning to navigate the constant flow of change with grace and wisdom is another. This is where the practical dimension of the Buddha's teachings comes into play. It's not enough to intellectually agree that everything changes or that there's no fixed self. The real transformation occurs when we begin to cultivate an attitude of acceptance, a willingness to embrace the flow rather than resist it. This doesn't mean becoming passive or resigned to fate, nor does it mean suppressing our natural human emotions. Instead, it involves developing a new relationship with change, one rooted in awareness, wisdom, and compassion. So, how do we begin to cultivate this ability to embrace the flow? One of the foundational practices is mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment, intentionally and non-judgmentally. By cultivating mindfulness, we become more attuned to the subtle and constant arising and passing of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and to underscore the phenomena in our environment. Instead of being lost in thought about the past or worrying about the future, we learn to anchor ourselves in the now. And what do we find in the now? We find change. We observe a thought arise, linger, and dissolve. We notice a sensation intensify, then fade. We see the breath come in, and the breath go out. Each one unique, each one a tiny microcosm of impermanence. Through consistent mindfulness practice, we begin to experience anicca directly, not just as a concept, but as the very texture of our experience. This direct seeing weakens our habitual tendency to solidify our experiences and cling to them. When we are mindful, we are less likely to get swept away by a strong emotion, because we see it as a temporary mental event rather than an absolute truth about ourselves or our situation. Closely related to mindfulness is the cultivation of equanimity, upekkha. Equanimity is not indifference or apathy, it's a balanced state of mind. A calm and steady heart that can meet life's inevitable ups and downs, the 8 worldly winds of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute, without being thrown off balance. It arises from the wisdom that understands impermanence. If we know that pleasant experiences are fleeting, we can enjoy them without desperately clinging to them. If we know that unpleasant experiences are also temporary, we can endure them with greater patience and less reactivity. Equanimity allows us to maintain an inner stability even when the outer world is in turmoil. It's like being the calm center of a storm. We can develop equanimity by observing our reactions to pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and consciously choosing not to get caught up in excessive craving for the pleasant or excessive aversion to the unpleasant. It's about finding that middle path, acknowledging the experience without adding a layer of secondary suffering through our resistance or attachment. Another crucial aspect of embracing the flow is letting go, nekkhamma. This doesn't necessarily mean renouncing all worldly possessions or relationships in a literal sense, though for some, that may be their path. More broadly, It means letting go of our attachments, our unrealistic expectations, our rigid ideas about how things should be. It's about loosening our grip on outcomes, on people, on our self-image. Letting go is an active process, not a passive surrender. It requires courage to release what we are clinging to, even if it feels safe or familiar. We can practice letting go in small ways every day. Letting go of a minor annoyance. Letting go of the need to be right. Letting go of a past regret. Each act of letting go strengthens our ability to navigate bigger changes with more ease. It's like training a muscle. The more we practice releasing, the easier it becomes. When we understand that everything is impermanent, letting go becomes a natural consequence, a wise response to the way things are. Developing wisdom, panna, specifically the wisdom that understands impermanence, non-self, and the causes of suffering, is also key. This involves studying these teachings, reflecting on them, and seeing how they apply to our own lives. When we truly understand, at a deep level, that clinging to the impermanent causes suffering, our motivation to cling naturally diminishes. Wisdom helps us to see through the illusions that our mind creates. The illusion of permanence, the illusion of a solid self. It allows us to differentiate between what is truly beneficial and what leads to more entanglement and pain. This wisdom isn't just intellectual, it's an intuitive understanding that arises from practice and deep contemplation. Cultivating patience, khanti, is also essential. Change often doesn't happen on our preferred timeline. Healing takes time. Growth takes time. Difficult situations take time to resolve. If we are impatient, we create more frustration and agitation for ourselves. Patience is the ability to wait, to endure, to persevere without losing heart. Understanding that all things are unfolding according to their own rhythm. It's a form of acceptance of the present moment, even if it's not what we want it to be. Finally, compassion, karuna, both for ourselves and for others, plays a vital role. When we struggle with change, when we find ourselves clinging or resisting, self-compassion allows us to be kind and understanding towards our own human frailties. We recognize that this is a difficult process, and we don't need to add self-criticism to our suffering. Compassion for others arises when we see that they too are caught in the same web of impermanence and suffering. They too are struggling with change and loss. This shared vulnerability can foster a sense of connection and a desire to alleviate suffering wherever we find it. Embracing the flow is not a one-time achievement but an ongoing practice. A way of life. It involves a continuous reorientation of our mind and heart away from resistance and towards acceptance. Away from clinging and towards letting go. It's about learning to dance with the rhythms of change rather than trying to stand still in a flowing river. By incorporating practices like mindfulness, equanimity, letting go, wisdom, patience, and compassion into our daily lives, we can gradually transform our relationship with impermanence, finding not fear or anxiety, but a profound sense of freedom and peace amidst the ever-shifting currents of existence. It's about discovering that the very impermanence we once feared can become the ground for a more awake, alive, and joyful way of being. For many, the initial encounter with the concept of impermanence, anicca, can feel somber, perhaps even a little frightening. The idea that nothing lasts, that everything we cherish will eventually change or disappear, can evoke a sense of loss, insecurity, or even nihilism. If everything is fleeting, what's the point? Why invest in anything? However, from the perspective of Buddhist wisdom, this initial reaction, while understandable, misses a crucial dimension of impermanence. When deeply understood and embraced, anicca is not a harbinger of despair but a gateway to a more profound appreciation of life. A source of genuine joy, and a catalyst for living more fully and authentically. It reframes our perception, allowing us to find beauty and wonder precisely in the evanescent nature of existence. One of the most immediate ways impermanence can lead to joy is by heightening our appreciation for the present moment. If we know that this moment, this experience, this interaction is unique and will never come again in exactly the same way, it suddenly becomes incredibly precious. Think of a stunning sunset. Its beauty is intensified by the knowledge that it is temporary. The colors shift, deepen, and then fade into twilight. If sunsets lasted for days, would we still pause in awe to watch them? Probably not. It is their fleeting nature that captivates us and urges us to be fully present for their display. Similarly, when we recognize the impermanence of our relationships, We are more likely to cherish the time we have with our loved ones, to be more attentive, more expressive of our affection, less likely to take them for granted. The laughter of a child, a heartfelt conversation with a friend, a quiet moment of connection with a partner. All these become more poignant and meaningful when we are aware of their transient nature. We stop deferring our engagement with life, thinking, "I'll appreciate this later." And instead, we dive into the richness of the now. Impermanence also fosters a sense of gratitude. When we realize that nothing is guaranteed, that the good things in our lives, our health, our relationships, our opportunities, even our next breath, are not permanent entitlements but temporary gifts, we can cultivate a deep sense of thankfulness. Instead of focusing on what we lack or what we might lose, we can shift our attention to appreciating what we have, right here, right now. This gratitude is not a Pollyanna-ish denial of difficulties, but a conscious choice to acknowledge the blessings, however small or transient, that are present in our lives. Each day becomes an opportunity to be grateful for the simple fact of being alive, for the beauty that surrounds us, for the connections we share. This gratitude itself is a source of joy and contentment. Furthermore, understanding impermanence can liberate us from the burden of perfectionism and the fear of failure. If everything is constantly changing, then there's no such thing as a fixed state of perfection to achieve or maintain. Our efforts, our creations, our very selves are all works in progress, constantly evolving. This understanding can free us to experiment, to take risks, to learn from our mistakes without being crippled by the fear of not measuring up to some static ideal. If we stumble, if things don't go as planned, we can see it as part of the natural, dynamic process of life, rather than a permanent reflection of our worth. This freedom from the need to be perfect can unlock a great deal of creative energy and joy in our endeavors. We can approach tasks with a lighter heart, knowing that outcomes are not final and that change is always possible. The awareness of Anicca can also lead to a deeper connection with the natural world. Nature is a constant, magnificent teacher of impermanence, the turning of the seasons, the cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal in plants and animals, the erosion of mountains, the shifting of coastlines. All these processes vividly illustrate the truth of change. By observing nature, we can learn to see the beauty in every stage of this cycle, not just in the peak bloom but also in the falling leaves and the winter dormancy. This can help us to accept the natural cycles in our own lives, including aging and eventual death, as part of a larger, beautiful, and ever-transforming pattern. There's a profound joy in feeling part of this grand, dynamic unfolding, rather than separate from it or in opposition to it. Moreover, impermanence can actually enhance our experience of pleasure and happiness. When we are not desperately trying to cling to a pleasant experience or make it last forever, we can relax into it more fully and savor it for what it is, a temporary gift. The anxiety of, will this last? Or, how can I keep this feeling? Diminishes, allowing us to be more present and open to the joy of the moment. It's like appreciating a beautiful piece of music. We don't try to hold onto a single note. We allow the melody to flow, to arise and pass away. And it is in this very flow that the beauty of the music is found. Similarly, life's joys are more deeply felt when we are not tensing against their eventual departure but are fully immersed in their present unfolding. Finally, recognizing the impermanence of suffering itself can be a profound source of hope and relief. When we are in pain, whether physical or emotional, the thought that, "this too shall pass," is not a platitude but a deep truth rooted in Anicca. It doesn't mean the pain isn't real or valid, but it does mean it won't last forever in its current intensity. This understanding can give us the strength to endure difficult times, knowing that change is inevitable and that relief is possible. The darkness will eventually give way to light. This knowledge itself can bring a measure of peace even amidst hardship. A joy born not from the absence of pain, but from the understanding of its transient nature. So, far from being a depressing doctrine, the wisdom of impermanence, when truly embraced, illuminates the path to a richer, more vibrant, and more joyful existence. It teaches us to savor the sweetness of the present, to cultivate gratitude for the ephemeral gifts of life, to let go of the burdens of perfectionism, to connect more deeply with the natural world, and to find hope even in times of suffering. It turns out that the very fleetingness of life is what makes it so incredibly precious and so capable of yielding profound joy. if only we open our hearts and minds to its ever-changing beauty. Beyond the personal peace and joy that can arise from embracing impermanence. This profound understanding has significant implications for our relationships with others and our capacity for compassion, karuna, and loving kindness, metta. When we truly grasp that everyone, without exception, is subject to the same universal law of anicca, that all beings are in a constant state of flux, experiencing their own cycles of joy and sorrow, gain and loss, birth and death, it can fundamentally shift how we perceive and interact with the world around us. The realization of shared impermanence can dismantle the illusion of separation, fostering a deep sense of interconnectedness and empathy. Firstly, understanding that others are also navigating the unpredictable currents of change can make us more tolerant and patient. When someone acts in a way that we find difficult or frustrating, recognizing that their behavior, their mood, their opinions are also impermanent states can help us to react with less anger and more understanding. Perhaps they are going through a difficult time, experiencing their own internal struggles, or simply caught in a temporary pattern of unskillful behavior. Knowing that this, too, can change, both in them and in our perception of them, allows us to hold space for their humanity. Flaws and all, we become less quick to judge and label people as permanently bad or annoying. Realizing that everyone is a work in progress, constantly evolving, this perspective can diffuse conflict and create more harmonious relationships. Secondly, the awareness of shared impermanence can deepen our empathy. When we see a friend suffering from a loss, or a colleague stressed about a deadline, or even a stranger looking distressed, recognizing our own experiences of similar impermanent hardships allows us to connect with their pain on a more visceral level. We know what it feels like for joy to fade, for plans to go awry, for health to falter. This shared vulnerability, this common ground of experiencing the ever-shifting nature of life, becomes a bridge for empathy. We are more likely to offer support, a listening ear, or a kind word, not out of pity, but out of a genuine understanding of the human condition. The us versus them mentality begins to dissolve when we see that they are subject to the exact same fundamental realities as us. This leads directly to the cultivation of compassion. True compassion, in the Buddhist sense, is not just a feeling of sympathy, it's an active wish for others to be free from suffering, coupled with a willingness to help if we can. When we understand that suffering often arises from clinging to the impermanent, and we see others caught in this cycle, our hearts can open with a desire to alleviate their pain. We recognize that their struggles with change, loss, and disappointment are no different from our own. This realization can motivate us to act in ways that are kind, supportive, and helpful, reducing the suffering in the world, even in small ways. The understanding of anicca reminds us that everyone is fighting their own battle with the transient nature of things, and this naturally inclines the heart towards gentleness and care. Moreover, recognizing the impermanence of life itself can make us value our connections more deeply and urgently. If we know that our time with loved ones is finite, that opportunities for connection and kindness are not limitless, we are more likely to make the effort to nurture our relationships. We might be quicker to forgive, slower to hold grudges, more willing to express our love and appreciation. The thought that, this person will not always be here, or, I will not always be here, can cut through petty disagreements and highlight what truly matters, the quality of our connection in the present moment. This doesn't mean living in constant fear of loss, but rather living with a heightened awareness of the preciousness and temporality of our relationships, which can inspire us to be more present, loving, and engaged. The understanding of anicca can also help us to let go of resentments and grievances. Holding on to anger or bitterness towards someone is like carrying a hot coal, hoping the other person will get burned. It primarily harms ourselves. When we realize that the person who hurt us is also an impermanent collection of changing aggregates, and that the situation that caused the pain is also in the past and subject to change, it can become easier to release the burden of resentment. This doesn't mean condoning harmful actions, but it does mean freeing ourselves from being perpetually defined by past hurts. Forgiveness becomes more accessible when we understand that everyone is caught in the flow of becoming, capable of change, and subject to suffering. Finally, the shared experience of impermanence fosters a sense of universal kinship. Anicca is a great equalizer. It doesn't discriminate based on wealth, status, race, religion, or any other superficial distinction. We are all in this together, riding the waves of change. This profound commonality can break down barriers and foster a sense of solidarity with all beings. When we see the suffering caused by clinging to permanence in ourselves, we can more easily recognize it and have compassion for it in others, even those we perceive as very different from us. This sense of interconnectedness is a powerful antidote to alienation and loneliness, and it forms the very foundation for a compassionate global ethic. Thus, the wisdom of impermanence extends far beyond individual liberation. It is a powerful catalyst for building a more compassionate and understanding world. By recognizing our shared journey through the ever-changing landscape of existence, we can cultivate a heart that is more patient, empathetic, forgiving, and motivated to alleviate the suffering of all beings. Anicca, in this light, is not just a truth about reality, but a call to kindness, a reminder that in our fleeting lives, the connections we forge and the compassion we extend are among the most meaningful and enduring legacies we can create. As we journey deeper into the implications of Anicca, we arrive at one of its most potent and liberating applications: its power to help us cultivate fearless present living. So much of human anxiety and fear is rooted in our preoccupation with the future, worrying about what might go wrong, fearing potential losses, or dreading the ultimate impermanence of our own lives, death. Conversely, we can also be shackled by the past, regretting past actions, clinging to past glories, or being haunted by past traumas. The wisdom of impermanence, when truly internalized, acts as a powerful antidote to these fear-based mindsets, anchoring us firmly in the only time that truly exists, the present moment. By understanding and accepting that everything is in flux, we can begin to release our grip on both the future's uncertainties and the past's unchangeable realities, thereby opening ourselves up to a life lived with more courage, vitality, and presence. One of the most pervasive human fears is the fear of loss. We fear losing our health, our loved ones, our financial security, our youth, our abilities. This fear often stems from our attachment to these things and our illusion that they can or should be permanent. When we deeply understand Anicca, we recognize that loss, in various forms, is an inevitable part of the human experience because everything is inherently transient. This doesn't mean we become callous or stop caring. Instead, it means we can approach the possibility of loss with a different perspective. Instead of living in constant dread of what might be taken away, we can focus on appreciating and engaging fully with what we have in the present. The knowledge that something is impermanent can, paradoxically, free us to love it more completely and less possessively, knowing that our true richness lies in the quality of our present engagement, not in the guarantee of future permanence. This leads directly to overcoming the fear of the unknown future. Many of us spend a significant amount of mental energy trying to control the future, planning for every contingency, and worrying about potential negative outcomes. While prudent planning has its place, excessive worry about the future is a major source of stress and anxiety, and it robs us of the joy of the present. Anicca teaches us that the future is, by its very nature, uncertain and unpredictable because conditions are always changing. Trying to secure a permanently stable and predictable future is an impossible task. Accepting this inherent uncertainty allows us to relax our efforts to control the uncontrollable. We can still make wise choices and set intentions, but we do so with a lighter touch, understanding that life will inevitably unfold in ways we cannot fully anticipate. This acceptance can bring a profound sense of relief and freedom, allowing us to meet the future with curiosity and adaptability rather than fear and rigidity. Perhaps the most profound fear that impermanence helps us confront is the fear of death. Death is the ultimate manifestation of Anicca in our personal lives. The prospect of our own non-existence, or the loss of loved ones, can be a source of deep existential angst. Buddhist teachings don't offer an escape from death, but they offer a way to change our relationship to it. By contemplating impermanence regularly, by observing the constant arising and passing of all phenomena, including our own thoughts, sensations, and even our sense of self, anatta, the idea of cessation becomes less alien and less terrifying. If I am not a fixed, permanent entity but an ever-changing process, then the ending of this process can be seen as a natural part of its unfolding. rather than the destruction of something solid and eternal. Furthermore, by living fully in the present, by cultivating love, wisdom, and compassion, we create a life of meaning and purpose, which can reduce the regret and fear often associated with the end of life. The focus shifts from the fear of dying to the art of living well, here and now. Embracing impermanence also fosters courage and resilience. When we understand that difficulties, setbacks, and painful experiences are also impermanent, we are less likely to be crushed by them. We develop the inner strength to face adversity, knowing that, this too shall pass. This doesn't mean we won't feel pain or sadness, but it means these experiences won't define us or lead to a sense of permanent hopelessness. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from challenges, and a deep understanding of Anicca is a powerful foundation for this quality. It allows us to see challenges as temporary storms rather than permanent fixtures in our landscape, giving us the courage to persevere. Moreover, living with an awareness of impermanence encourages us to live authentically and prioritize what truly matters. If life is fleeting, then there's no time to waste on trivialities, on living according to others' expectations, or on pursuing goals that don't align with our deepest values. The awareness of our limited time can be a powerful motivator to clarify our priorities, to pursue our passions, to mend broken relationships, and to express our true selves. It cuts through the noise of superficial concerns and focuses our attention on what gives our life meaning and joy. We become less willing to postpone happiness or defer our dreams, recognizing that the present moment is the only opportunity we have. This fearless present living isn't about recklessness or a denial of responsibility. It's about engaging with life with open eyes and an open heart, fully aware of its transient nature, and therefore, fully committed to making the most of each moment. It's about trading the anxiety of, what if, for the vitality of, what is. When we stop fighting the current of change and learn to flow with it, we discover a profound sense of freedom. We are no longer held hostage by our fears of the future or our regrets about the past. Instead, we can inhabit the present moment with a sense of groundedness, courage, and an appreciation for the precious, ever-changing gift of life. The fear of impermanence dissolves when we realize that impermanence itself is the gateway to living each moment as if it truly matters, because it does. We have journeyed through the multifaceted landscape of Anicca, exploring its cosmic reach, its everyday manifestations, its intimate presence within our own minds and bodies, and its profound implications for our experience of suffering, our understanding of self, our capacity for joy, our connections with others, and our ability to live fearlessly in the present. Now, as we draw these threads together, we arrive at the ultimate gift that the wisdom of impermanence offers: the possibility of finding a deep and abiding peace in the very heart of change. This isn't a peace that comes from eliminating change, for that is impossible, nor is it a peace that depends on circumstances always being pleasant. Rather, it is a serene and unshakable equilibrium that arises from fully understanding, accepting, and aligning ourselves with the fundamental truth that everything is in constant flow. This peace is not a passive resignation or a stoic indifference. It is an active, dynamic state of being, born from wisdom and cultivated through practice. When we truly internalize that all conditioned things are impermanent, a significant portion of our inner struggle begins to subside. The relentless mental effort we expend trying to hold on to things, to resist change, to control outcomes, starts to ease. Imagine the energy freed up when we stop pushing against an immovable force. This liberated energy can then be channeled into more wholesome and life-affirming pursuits, cultivating presence, deepening our connections, acting with compassion, and appreciating the simple beauty of existence. The constant tension between our desire for permanence and the reality of impermanence, which is a primary source of stress and anxiety, begins to dissolve. In its place, a sense of lightness and spaciousness can emerge. This profound serenity also stems from the de-escalation of our ego's demands. The teaching of anatta, so closely linked to anicca, shows us that the self we so fiercely protect and promote is itself a transient, conditioned process. When we lessen our identification with this fixed sense of self, we become less vulnerable to the inevitable slings and arrows of fortune. Praise and blame, gain and loss, success and failure, these still occur, but they no longer have the same power to inflate our ego or crush our spirit. We see them as passing phenomena, like clouds drifting across the sky, rather than definitive statements about our inherent worth. This detachment from the ego's dramas is a cornerstone of true peace. We are no longer on a perpetual roller coaster of emotional highs and lows, buffeted by every changing circumstance. Instead, we find a deeper, more stable ground of being. Furthermore, the peace found in embracing impermanence is deeply connected to gratitude and contentment. When we cease demanding that life conform to our desires for permanence and instead learn to appreciate the fleeting gifts that each moment offers, contentment naturally arises. We find joy not in the accumulation of more things or the achievement of more accolades, but in the simple act of being present with what is, the constant striving for more, or better, or different, which is often fueled by a dissatisfaction with the present, which itself is always changing, gives way to an appreciation for the abundance that already exists, however transient. This shift from a mindset of lack to one of gratitude is profoundly peace-inducing. We realize that happiness is not contingent upon things staying the same, but can be found within the changing tapestry of life itself. This peace is also characterized by resilience and adaptability. Life will continue to present challenges, difficulties, and losses. The wisdom of impermanence doesn't make us immune to these experiences, but it equips us to navigate them with greater skill and less suffering. Knowing that even the most difficult situations are subject to change gives us hope and strength. We become more like a willow tree, which bends in the storm but doesn't break, rather than a rigid oak that might be uprooted. This flexibility, this ability to adapt to changing conditions without losing our inner balance, is a hallmark of a mind at peace with impermanence. We learn to surf the waves of change rather than being drowned by them. Ultimately, the peace that comes from embracing Anicca is a liberating peace. It is freedom from the tyranny of our own attachments, aversions, and illusions. It is freedom from the fear of change and the dread of loss. It is the freedom to engage with life fully, authentically, and joyfully, knowing that each moment is precious precisely because it is fleeting. This is the peace that the Buddha spoke of, a peace that surpasses all understanding, not because it is irrational, but because it transcends the ordinary, conditioned mind that is constantly seeking security in the impermanent. It is the peace of nibbana, nirvana, in its most accessible, everyday sense, the cooling of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that are so often fanned by our resistance to anicca. Living with this understanding doesn't mean we will never again feel sadness, or frustration, or fear. We are human, and these emotions are part of our experience. However, when these feelings arise, they no longer have the same grip on us. We can meet them with mindfulness and compassion, recognizing them as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. We can see them as part of the ever-changing flow, and allow them to pass without becoming overwhelmed or identified with them. The journey to this peace is an ongoing one, a path of continuous learning, practice, and refinement, but the promise is profound. By decoding the truth of impermanence, by truly seeing things as they are, we can untangle ourselves from the roots of our suffering and discover a serenity that is not dependent on external conditions. A peace that resides within us, stable and radiant, even as the world around us continues its ceaseless dance of change. This is the Buddha's timeless secret, a gift of wisdom that invites us not to escape life, but to live it more fully, more wisely, and with a heart at peace with the beautiful, ephemeral flow of it all.